It is a very clear sign to say that I'm above the law. And this is the first time it's such a shift. In the past, US government has always been touted as it is a country ruled by policies. But it just turns that whole thing around.
Welcome back to the Are We OK podcast, the podcast that talks about politics and public policies in ways that are relevant to you guys, our loyal listeners, especially those who have subscribed to us. More than 32,000 already. My name is Dr. Bota and...
This is Mr. Money, Peter.
So Peter, happy Chinese New Year.
恭喜發財.
恭喜發財，萬事如意. So I think we survived through 1 week of Chinese New Year, got some good rest. Did you go anywhere?
Oh yeah, mainly just gathering with family, back to Kajang, hang out with the relatives quite a bit, uncles, aunties, all get together. But aside from that, nothing much.
So if I were to ask you, when you hang out with your aunts and uncles and you see the adults in the room gathered during Chinese New Year, what do they usually talk about?
Okay. I think this comes down to different age group lah, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
For me, I think most of my uncles are at the retirement level. So many of things that they are talking about lately, obviously things are very expensive.
Health. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Then talk about health. Talk about children, in-laws, that kind of things.
And grandchildren,
my
children
maybe. Grandchildren, that kind of thing.
Do any of the older uncles talk about like politics and different kind of
For
issues?
my family side, less.
Okay.
My family side less, but I have to say that if it's not from my family, generally outside, when I meet other uncle and aunties, they do tend to ask me a bit more about politics. Also because some of them watch Are We OK?
Okay. My sense is that, the older and the adult guys, when they get together, including during Chinese New Year, they will want to talk about current issues.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Usually, asking people about, what do they think about what the government is doing, whether it's the Malaysian government or in this case, what the US government. We'll talk about that, more of that as well. And I think it's quite interesting because when I was younger, when the adults were talking about these things, right, I didn't really contribute much to the conversation. I just listened, right? And then now, when I'm older and when I hear other adults talk about these political issues, I also don't contribute much.
Really? I thought everyone was asking you a question.
Because I don't want to say too much. Because now I'm at a stage where I probably know more than the average person. So whenever people talk about these things, right, I don't want to be in a position to correct them, or I don't want to be in a position where I say too much and then take them too much behind the curtain.
Right. I thought you were going to have a private podcast with them. I'm feeling even further back.
No, this one we have to reserve for maybe a special group of our loyal listeners.
Fantastic. Before I go into the topic, Ken Ming, do you know how many people who watch our show but are not subscribed?
Currently, we have 32,500 subscribers.
So apparently about 52% of them are actually not subscribed to our channel, but they actually watch our show. Yeah, and some of it can hit up to about 60, but average is about there. So it means that you guys are watching out there. Out of 2 people, 1 person actually haven't hit the subscribe button. So we really want to increase our subscription rate. Could you help us to just hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification? What happens is that if you turn on the notification, YouTube will inform you when we upload our next episode.
Yeah, so I think maybe to start on our first topic for this podcast, after coming back from Chinese New Year, obviously there's been a lot of news in terms of what President Trump has done after his inauguration on the 20th of January. We've not had an episode to go and really delve into the details. But I think this is a good time because if we count from January 20th until now, a bit over 2 weeks, it's what some commentators have described to be a fire hose of executive orders and also of different kinds of announcements being pronounced, almost by decree from the White House.
Yep.
Right. So, I'd like to ask your opinion on some of the things that maybe, capture your attention more. But maybe we can divide it between domestic agenda items, domestic meaning US domestic agenda items, and then more importantly, some of the foreign policies that may affect Malaysia's economy and also Southeast Asia's economy.
Yep.
Right. So, I think some of the highlights of the domestic agenda, I've gone to the whitehouse.gov website more times than in the past few weeks than during Biden's whole administration. So some of these highlights include cabinet appointments. Some of them a bit controversial. For example, the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who was a Fox commentator, and when he was nominated as Defense Secretary, some scandals from his past came up, but it seems like he's going to get through the nomination. Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democratic congresswoman from Hawaii, who has been named as the Director for National Intelligence, and then Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the son of Bobby Kennedy, who has been named the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Human Services. He's been a bit controversial because of his past as a vaccine denier and a few other sort of like more controversial items that is directly associated with his portfolio. So there's a lot of cabinet level appointments. Of course, for us, I think the most important ones would be Howard Lutnick, who is the U.S. Commerce Secretary. He will be in charge of things like interpreting and executing tariffs. And then also Marco Rubio. He's the Florida senator who has been nominated as the Secretary of State. Right? So, I think the whole cabinet appointments are something that we will continue to look at. Second thing that I think is of interest is pardoning all those who were convicted in the January 6, 2020 attacks on the Capitol. Right? Initially, people thought that, he may do a vetting process. Some of the more egregious people who were guilty of some of the more heinous acts, including violence towards policemen and all that, maybe they won't be pardoned. But Trump said, "Screw that, just pardon everyone."
And he called everyone a hero.
Yeah. And I think because of this fire hose of different things that were ordered, right, this got some attention, but people had to move on to other things. Giving a reprieve of 75 days, if I'm not mistaken, on the TikTok ban. Right, so TikTok said they were going to shut down, and then later, I think this is a way in which they wanted to show that Trump is saving us. They restarted the next day, and then this was before the inauguration, actually on the 19th of January. And then Trump, one of the first things he did as an executive order was to say that yes, TikTok is of concern, but it's also a platform that's important to over 170 million US users, and I'll give them a grace period of 75 days, I think, in order to come up with some sort of a solution that may or may not include a US company buying a majority stake. Right? So, another one is trying to get rid of the citizenship by birth. This will definitely be challenged in court because that's a principle that has been upheld by the Supreme Court, and also is important in the psyche of most Americans. That means if you're born there, then you have a right to become a citizen. Declaring an emergency on the southern border. This is part and parcel of his whole campaign about trying to reduce the number of illegal immigrants. And then also ending DEI or diversity and inclusiveness policies within the government. And this will also have a spillover effect into the private sector as well. So out of all these domestic agenda items, and there are others that I haven't named yet, what struck out to you, as things that are worth discussing?
I have to say that actually all of it was so interesting, right? Like literally, if we were to go into it, I think we can go for hours. But there are a few things that I really want to dive deep into it. That would be, number one, the ending of DEI policies. Not just that, also inclusive of the overall environmental effort that we are seeing more and more companies pulling out themselves from. The question of is it good and bad, right? That's number one. I think number two is also more of a joke kind of thing that I want to make. And also I'll be asking you a question on that, is the appointment of cabinets.
Okay.
Right? Why is it so? Is because I think that the way you appoint people is truly interesting. It's truly, truly interesting, right? And the last part of it is actually on the pardoning of the attackers.
Okay.
I think there's really something worth talking about.
And I think all those, we can draw parallels to what's happening in Malaysia as well.
That's right.
Right? So let's start with DEI. This emphasis on diversity and inclusive policies that was put in by Biden, and also taking a lead from the private sector as well. And then we also have to link this to some of the ESG related policies as
That's
well
right.
in the larger scheme of these, the kind of policy landscape, whether it's public or private. And we see Trump definitely reversing many of the DEI kind of policies and also putting a stop to some of the environmental policies, including, for example, taking away some of the subsidies given to EVs that are produced in the US, right? So this is, definitely has an effect, not just in terms of the look and feel of how the US government is like, but also impact on the private sector. And I'll just give you one example. After all this DI stuff came out, right? One of the things that I noticed and looked out for is whether or not Trump will make an effort to even wish the Chinese Americans Happy Chinese New Year.
Did he?
Of course he didn't. And last time Biden used to have these kinds of different festivals that are being celebrated, including Chinese New Year. He'll have some lion dance and stuff like that at the White House. Once or twice I've seen that happen. But under Trump, none of this.
Not even a celebration in the White House.
No red packet, no fireworks, nothing like that.
I see.
Yeah, so I mean those are more of the optics side. But on the economic side, we can see that probably in terms of hiring practices, the federal government would definitely, not have these kinds of policies anymore. And then the private sector, will probably follow suit as well. And, it'll be interesting to see what kind of impact this would have on the multinational companies, especially the US companies that are operating outside the US, places like Malaysia and others where these issues can be part and parcel of the corporate landscape. Generally speaking, I think in a good way.
So when it comes to this DEI, I think there are a few things I want to highlight. I think number one is that we talk about the company level. Ever since this DEI thing come out, all the other companies, including Meta and others, they are starting to put their stand to support it. Right, like for example, even I think Mark Zuckerberg at one point was making a statement. He said that we're gonna install more manhood on Meta, and it's a bit like
more masculinity.
Masculinity. like what do you mean by that? Yeah, okay, sounds good, but what do you
more
mean
macho,
by that?
Is it?
Yeah. Ever since Trump took presidency, and one of the ways that a lot of these corporate are trying to show their support,
alignment.
Yeah, an alignment towards his policies, is by making very interesting statements that it's almost like lip service lah. You get what I mean? Like, just say it for the sake of saying kind of things, just to please the boss.
But I think it's actually more than lip service. I mean, if you expand beyond the DEI for some of these companies, especially the tech companies, Facebook basically said we're not gonna moderate social media anymore.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. So maybe lip service is not the right word, but rather just a blind alignment without much. Like last time, before they make a decision, there's a lot of steps that they go through, a lot more proper planning, everything. Now it's just, let's just follow, right? And it seems like this time around also, every single corporate titans is willingly, openly associating themselves with Trump.
They have to get and kiss the ring lah.
Yeah, kiss the ring. Unlike last time, right, where no matter who's the president, you try to keep a little bit distant. This time around, it's very different. It's kiss the ring, right? That's number one. And yeah, they want to be associated.
Yeah, and all of these are tech billionaires and CEOs. They were at the inauguration.
That's right. Yeah, and now then there comes a challenge, because DEI agenda and ESG agenda, it's such a big thing all around the world. Now suddenly under the US company, right, who used to be the spearheading force of it, now suddenly you are taking a back step. Yeah. But your other countries still have the same standard of expectation. So how is it going to play out? That will be one question that really will affect the rest of the operation.
Yeah, so I think we can probably talk about this in depth in another episode when we get an expert to come and talk to us about this. But definitely, you will see perhaps a slowdown on some of the global ESG and climate change related initiatives, which Trump has announced for the second time that the US will pull out of in terms of the COP Accords. But I think leadership will be given, initiated by other countries and other regions. So I think the EU will continue to push for environmental regulations and policies, better environmental regulations and policies. I think probably China will want to do that to show that they continue to be, I think, committed to those kinds of issues. but maybe the pace will slow down.
But nonetheless, I think the other part of it is that I kind of semi-agree with some of the things that he actually roll out. Like, for example, the part where he don't allow kind of chemical castration, because I think US sometimes is a little bit too liberal.
Yeah, things like gender reassessment,
yes, that's right.
surgeries.
Because one thing I don't quite agree with it, was the fact that when a kid is about like 12, 15, they can say that, I want a gender reassignment. And I mean, it's a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, and these kind of things, you can't sort of like U-turn after.
You can't reverse, right? Yeah. So I feel like when you allow them to do it later days, that's another story. But to allow that at the teenage age, I think I'm quite happy to a certain extent that he implements certain rulings. But the fear now is it will swing to the other end where, say, LGBTQ or whatsoever get too oppressed or whatever.
I mean, the people with minority viewpoints and lifestyles will feel more pressure.
That's right. Yeah. So nonetheless, I hope that you end up restoring somewhat of a balance. Rather than right now where it is a little bit too woke. Because I had this experience of a friend of mine who actually came back from the US. So I asked this person, like, why didn't you want to stay there after about a 2 years assignment there? So apparently what happened was that they had a health week in their office, and one of the managers was supposed to lead that health week. And that week's theme was about eating healthy. So during the team announcement, the manager said during the speech that, if you want to be healthy, maybe it's time to swap out that burger for a salad for those who are overweight. The next month, she had to make a public apology in town hall, and she got a letter from HR that is discrimination.
That you are discriminating against people who are overweight.
Yes, and that got me, like, wow, like shocking, right? Like, it's a health week.
And also maybe discriminating against people who eat meat.
That's right. So I was wondering, like, I think US is already taking certain things to the other extreme. So I hope there can be somewhat of a balance.
Pull back a bit.
Pull back a little bit. But the worry now is that will it swing to the other end?
So maybe we'll end this segment on this part before we come back to the cabinet appointments. To what extent do you really see this kind of DEI agenda, or the woke agenda rather, being part and parcel of the Malaysian ecosystem?
I think there are more and more Malaysians who are going along with this woke agenda. I think Malaysia is still quite balanced. Not that bad. And the opinion is still quite balanced. There are certain people who take it to another extreme. And I think that if this goes too far, it may not be very good. And especially in Malaysia being a very multicultural society, there's certain respects and certain boundary. It may cause a lot of unnecessary issues. And I think that because there's so many aspects of this woke level, from gender to everything
sexual identity,
else. Sexual identity, to even the values of life kind of thing that has nothing to do with gender, right? So it really depends on which part that we are talking about. But I think that anything too much is not good. Moderation is the best. That's my view.
So I think for me, it will be interesting to see when I continue to engage with my students at Taylor's, especially those who are, starting the PPE program, what sort of worldview they have, whether it's shaped by what's happening outside the country or some of the things that are happening within the country, among their friends, probably a mix of everything, and to also see how they respond to some of the actions that are being undertaken by President Trump in the US context. Right. So with that, maybe we'll come back after we take a break, and then we'll talk about the cabinet appointment process. Be right back.
All right, welcome back to the Are We OK podcast. And now we are at the second part of this episode where we are going to dive down into the cabinet appointment of Trump's presidency. So I just want to start off with this, right, to you, Ken Ming. Do you notice that the cabinet appointments or anyone in his inner circle currently, the appointments, are many very interesting characters, right?
Interesting from what perspective?
Interesting in the sense of like some of them seem to be qualified but have a controversial viewpoint, while some of them are just popular people.
Popular meaning they appear on TV and then Trump has seen them on TV.
That's right. They have an opinion on TV,
Yeah.
right? So I was joking with Frankie Dior. I was saying that Trump, if he is Malaysia's prime minister, maybe he'll end up appointing me or Financial Faiz as the Minister of Finance.
Yeah. Correct. Could be.
You get my point, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
So-
they see you guys talking so much about financial issues.
That's right. Yeah. And then he may end up appointing, let's say, the vape president guy as the health minister. So if you were to think about it this way, if Trump were to be Malaysia's president, I think, who are the people that you think he will appoint into the cabinet and why?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a bit of a satire kind of thing, huh?
Yeah, so sort of like to take that analogy or that example forward, I would say that there are some politicians who probably will qualify under that kind of, more, optics kind of perspective. I would think that probably Syed Saddiq, right, will get appointed as a minister because he's good looking, young, fit, good on social media, a lot of followers, right? So he will probably, get some airtime. I think the guys from Keluar Sekejap, Khairi and Sharil, because there's so many followers and so many sort of like airtime with their KS lagi, they may get some sort of a position as well. You look at somebody like Tengku Zafrul, right, who's very good in social media, very good in presenting his arguments in different languages on different social media platforms. I think he would probably, get some sort of position. And then there are others that I think pretty good on social media. People like Hannah Yeoh, people like Yeo Bee Yin, people like Tioni Ching, all these are, very, I think, capable people who are, good at communicating and also, I think, effective in terms of their own portfolios as well.
Right. I think if he's going to be the president of Malaysia, I think Tony Pua and yourself will be back as well.
Maybe not.
He may send an invitation,
Maybe me because of this show, but Tony Pua, I think because he's not really appeared in the public that much, maybe he will be appointed as an official golf partner. Yeah, but it'll be interesting to speculate, this kind of appointment if, let's say, Trump was the prime minister of
That's
Malaysia.
right. I think many YouTubers will also end up becoming part of the cabinet. Yeah? Or even a TV announcer or whosoever.
Yeah. All those social media guys. I think Khairul Aming maybe will get a position as well.
Maybe he'll be maybe he'll be under KDNK or something like that.
Domestic trade, and then even things like taking care of the community. That will be a good portfolio for him.
That's right. Yeah.
And then we must get some influencers from Sabah and Sarawak to be part of the ecosystem. I mean the difference between Trump's cabinet appointments and in a presidential system versus Malaysia's parliamentary system is that all of his presidential cabinet appointees, they don't have to be members of Congress. They don't have to be somebody from the House or from the Senate. There are some like Senator Marco Rubio, what the Florida Attorney General I think has been appointed as the National Attorney General. But by and large, you have a free hand. Whereas in the Malaysian context, most of your cabinet appointees will be from the rank and file of the members of parliament in the Dewan Rakyat, the elected MPs.
Right. Yeah. At least also you must be a senator.
I mean, you have to be a member of parliament to be a member of cabinet in a parliamentary system like Malaysia. But of course, the majority of the cabinet will be those who are elected, rather than those who are appointed like Tengku Zafrul or the second finance minister.
Right. So how do you think this is going to play out in Trump's cabinet? Because you are definitely much more familiar in terms of the character. Yeah, maybe you can share with us a little bit of what's your opinion on the different characters that he bring in. Like, for example, for one, I cannot brain the fact that he bring in the Fox TV guy. That's as good as bringing me as a finance minister for me.
The Fox TV guy has been appointed as a Secretary of Defense. Pete Hegseth. So one of the more controversial appointments. I would say that they all have to, take their case to Trump through media, meaning they have to make probably a lot of TV appearances to let Trump see them in action. That's one. Second thing is, I think that Trump will order them to do certain things publicly, meaning he will have certain decrees that that he will issue as press statements or as presidential announcements, and he will say, "Oh, the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Health and Human Services needs to align and coordinate to do X, Y, and Z." Whether it's whether it's the US sort of like a foreign policy in terms of access to women's healthcare, for example, that does not include abortions, for example, right? So he would have all these edicts that he will publicly announce and say, "Hey, you have to do this, you have to do that," right? So I think this is something that would be quite unique to Trump, and that's why it's really important to go and look at what the White House, is saying, what the press announcements and the policy announcements are coming out from the White House. Yeah. So that's probably something else that's a little bit different from the Malaysian parliamentary system, right? Because most of the time, if you have important policies coming out from certain ministries, it's the minister that will announce them, right? It's not the prime minister that will come and say, issue something from PMO and say, the Minister of Transport has to do X, Y, and Z, right? So that's I think one of the differences.
Yeah, I think this time around, so many of his appointees, in my opinion, when I look at it, it looks to me many of the people who are just airdropped there, right? And so then there's the question of how much do they really know about that particular portfolio, right? And do they have the kind of necessary experience even to manage?
Trump did appoint many people in his first term that may have not stood the eye test. But I think because his personality and the White House and the presidency sucks up so much airtime and space. And this time it's going to be even more than before, right? So I think in a way, other than some of the main positions in cabinet, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Treasury, the equivalent of the Finance Minister, Foreign Secretary or Secretary of State, those are the more important portfolios. Like for example, Secretary of Education, you may know as the wife of somebody called Vince McMahon, who was the WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment CEO. The wife has been appointed as Secretary of Education. Most of the time, people don't really care about what the Secretary of Education does, because in the US, the education policies, unlike Malaysia, is actually very decentralized to the local levels, to the state and to the local levels. So, the attention will be paid to probably 4 or 5 important cabinet positions. I think the last thing that you mentioned just now is with regards to the pardons, right? So,
yes.
Yeah, what is it that made you notice?
Firstly, when it comes to the pardons, in the past, is not to say that US president have never exercised it. But usually when they exercise it, it's with a lot of caution and is to create some sort of a landmark thing, like a legacy.
And usually it's at the end of the term.
So, but what he did is that at the moment he go up there and then he pardoned all these people under the Capitol Hill riot and he named them as heroes. It is a very clear sign to say that I'm above the law. I am above the law because I am the law. And this is the first time, I would say, US history that is such a shift. Because in the past, US government has always been touted as it is a country ruled by policies.
And also where the rule of law governs.
That's right, where the rule of law governs. So regardless of who's the president, you can rest assured that the country is run not by the biasness of one man, right? And there's some sort of protection.
Checks and balance, yes.
But he just turns that whole thing around.
Yep.
And pardoning is one thing, and then announcing them as a hero and blatantly state that the reason why he pardoned them is because they fought for him.
Yes.
They fought for him. It's like, wow, this is no more about policy. This is, I am the emperor.
This is about loyalty.
This is about loyalty.
And I think what Trump did was to show his supporters that if you fight for me, even if you do something that's illegal, I can get you off the hook.
That's right. So suddenly he just turned things around, and now it is, and it makes sense why people are calling him, or rather I would say that they are making a little bit of a moniker of it, that he's the Imperial Trump, the Imperial Nation.
Yes. So no longer President Trump, but Emperor Trump.
Emperor Trump, right? Yeah, and that is very concerning to me.
Sure, yeah. And I think this is something that many people in the US have already pointed out, that it's almost as if he's trying to build his own militia, right? The people who could be galvanized and mobilized to support him if, let's say, he needs their support somewhere down the line, right? When maybe public sentiment may not be so supportive of him, when it is clear that some of his policies, which we'll talk about later in terms of tariffs, will actually create more harm than good, especially in terms of cost of living, right? Then he can, rely on these Proud Boys and others to try to stir up trouble, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is something that other countries may look at, other groups, including right-wing groups in many other countries, would look at and say, hey, this is something that's quite serious and quite significant. Maybe as a last point of note on the domestic policy side, we talked about cabinet appointments and all that, but I think it will be very interesting to see what is the trajectory and what is the kind of policy influence that Elon Musk will have. Right? In terms of his Department of Government Efficiency, what else he wants to put on the table in terms of trying to maybe reduce the size of the government. Some part of it may be digitalized and made more efficient. And of course, he's with this newfound burst of energy because he successfully, or at least in his mind, he successfully got President Trump elected. Elon Musk is going around and supporting other, I think, dangerous parties on the right wing in Germany, in the UK, and it's a trend that we should take note of. Let's quickly shift to foreign policy. I think in this sense, these are even more important issues that can have an impact on Malaysia and also Southeast Asia. Some of the foreign policy agendas, include pulling the US out of the WHO, the World Health Organization, and I think this is significant. If let's say we face another pandemic, the WHO is not going to have the money that the US used to give. It's not going to have the kind of coordination power without the US as a stakeholder, as a discussant within the power ecosystem. There's a 90-day pause in all foreign aid. This is through an agency called the USAID. There's also regulations new regulations trying to regulate the digital assets or the crypto ecosystem. But I think most people see that as something that's positive for the crypto sector. And, you can talk a bit more about that later. And as of yesterday or 2 days ago, additional tariffs of 25% on goods coming from Canada and Mexico into the US, and 10% on some of the goods coming from China on the pretext that these countries are allowing illegal drugs such as processed fentanyl and others into the US ecosystem, right? So, a lot again on the foreign policy side. Any issues which struck your interest specifically?
I think overall, from what I'm seeing in Trump's foreign policy is on two parts. Number one, he's literally declaring this one thing. Let us forget about all whatever world unions, all the alliance. It's each of his own. America is America. We are not of anyone, and we are the strongest. We shouldn't be listening to anyone.
So this is America First policy.
America First policy. And what is going to happen is that it is actually causing a lot of trouble, because with this happening and them being the leader, there will be many smaller countries who will be thinking about, now I still need their support, then how am I going to get that? Now it's better that I bypass all these unions or bypass all these alliance and go to him and make personal deals.
So go directly lah.
Yes. And now it sounds even more like an imperial country, right?
Yeah.
Rather than a part of a world citizen
You have to
country.
go and pay homage to the emperor.
That's right. I will pay homage
give
to the emperor.
tribute.
Give tribute. Yeah, it looks more and more like that with the way that he's been making things, right?
Yep.
No, but I would say that one of the parts that is really surprising one is his tariffs. Right, where he only implemented 10% tariff on China, and at the same time he allowed the TikTok to live on, for another 75 days. But instead he put a more heavier tariff on Canada and Mexico.
Yeah, two of his closest neighbors.
Yes, two of his closest neighbors. And I guess this is something that wasn't really that took many people by shock to a certain extent. Shock not so much about that he will do that, but rather the amount.
Because originally people were saying that, or he was saying that, he would impose a much higher level of tariffs on China,
That's right.
right?
Yeah, and that shows one thing is that probably he's starting to recognize that China can be the king on the other end of the world, but we should consolidate our power on this end of the world. So with all that in mind as well, I think China and Canada and Mexico is really threatening a fight back. EU as well is like, I mean, EU is slow. Let's just put it this way, they need everyone to agree on something, right?
Yep.
Which will weaken EU itself, because any guys there who wants to make a deal, they will go direct. Like for example, even Italy and so on, right? Yeah, and so EU will have to evolve.
Yeah, but
right?
I think on trade issues, the EU actually has a secretariat, has people in Brussels, administrators that basically govern the trade and tariff policies. So it will be difficult for Italy to go and say, look, go easy on us. You can go and whack the Germans or the French, I don't care, but on tariffs, go easy on us. That's not going to be possible, because you have to treat the whole EU as
one
entity in terms of tariffs.
Yeah, that's right.
So of course, you can treat some countries better than others in terms of access to computer chips, for example. Like Netherlands is a trusted partner. They have access to all the high-end chips from NVIDIA and things like that. But if let's say you are not a strategic partner, in this area, you're not a strong ally. Even if let's say you're in the EU, you may not necessarily be granted the same kind of access to certain technologies that others would have. So that may be something that will also have an impact on some of the intra-EU relations as well. How about crypto? I mean, people are saying that this guy is one of the he's going to be very pro-crypto. He himself has a cryptocurrency. And one of the things that I noticed in his presidential announcement is that they want to play down the role, in fact, ban the role of central bank digital currencies. Right? And then at the same time, sort of like give more prominence in terms of regulations to the crypto industry. Right? So the part where central banks may be wanting to have their own say, in this ecosystem, he's saying no way. If you want to do business with the US, the Fed is not going to look at central bank digital currencies as something that is acceptable to us, right? And then at the same time, crypto is okay, right?
Yeah.
What's your sort of like take on this?
I think he will be, in the long term, as in the next 5 years, he will be a good president for crypto lah. Yeah, that can't go wrong lah.
Yeah.
Why? It is less about what he believes in it, but rather the motivation that I think, in my limited knowledge of what I think crypto can do, can benefit him.
Meaning some personal interest, meaning some of the tech bros. Yeah.
I think he comes as a both encouraging and disappointment to the crypto community. Why do I say that? There's a big group of people in the crypto who wants to see crypto being more regulated, more legitimized, and being a proper asset that people will trust, right? And earlier on, a lot of his announcements were great, until just a few days before he was he go into his inauguration, he go and launch his own coin.
Yeah.
And it is a clear meme coin.
Yeah.
That is as good as, hey, this is a Wild Wild West.
Yeah. You can do anything.
You can do anything you want. And what's the purpose of the coin? Nope, just to celebrate me. And 80% of the coin is owned by him.
Yeah, go to him. Yeah.
You're just trying to regulate it and trying to say that, this is a good asset. And right now you're putting a bad name to it. So that's the mixture part. Now, on the other hand, as expected, there were a lot of rumors that he said that he's going to be accumulating Bitcoin as a national reserve, but he kept quiet about it. He talked a lot, but during this time when he's signing stuff, he did not say much. And I think it's not because he has lost interest. It's because it's just very logical. If you want to accumulate national reserve, you don't go announcing. It's going to bring up the price.
Yeah, you're going to try to accumulate quietly.
That's right.
Okay.
So with that in mind, I don't think crypto price will be that great in the near short term, and then you will suddenly see it go up, which aligns as well with the general rule. Right? So I think, like what he say, he has already declared saying that Bitcoin will be a national interest, national priority. I think he means that. And also at the same time, with the way that he's doing it, it's to his best interest.
Of course.
It is like a free hand to raise fund for him suddenly.
Sure.
He's less dependent on anyone else. He's less dependent on anything literally. And with his character is the fact that he's very upfront. He is not ashamed lah.
Yeah.
Like other people will feel paiseh lah.
Very thick skin about the transactional nature of his
He's just
presidency.
So I think it will keep going. It will be a good thing. But perception-wise, I think I'm disappointed. But in terms of economic value-wise, that part, since I'm an investor, I have to say.
So he'll be good for sort of like digital assets, crypto and things like that. Right, so I just want to end this session by saying that I think some of the domestic policy issues will be challenged. Even some of the foreign policy issues may be challenged in court, all the way up to the Supreme Court. This will take a little bit of time. It will be interesting to see which of these policies will have the most impact on Southeast Asia. And I think maybe just to end this section, it would be good for Malaysia to try to take the lead as chair of ASEAN to see whether we can craft out some sort of internal consensus within ASEAN so that we don't fall into the trap of exactly what you say, the divide and rule. Meaning certain countries will go and lobby directly to Trump to say, oh, don't go after us because we are good partners with you. We will do X, Y, and Z in order to help US companies and also help the US economy. Rather than have this kind of divide and rule approach, we should go together as an economic grouping called ASEAN to see what we can put on the table to be, let's say, a good supply chain location, safe for US companies, to be a place where US companies can do business in a transparent way, and to signal the fact that we are willing to accommodate a lot of the things that you want different countries to do, including countries in the Southeast Asian region.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think this is something that we have to see how it unfolds lah. Yeah, but I just have one more question before we close, right? Some people are quite worried that the way Trump handles foreign policy could lead to conflict, as in physical conflict.
Like wars lah, or skirmishes.
Wars, right, skirmishes. Why is it so? Is because for the first time that we are seeing a US president who actually even called president...
Denmark.
Denmark president.
I want to take over Greenland.
I want to take over Greenland and then have such a heated argument. He goes straight to Canada's like, you will never really see presidents and prime minister raising middle finger literally. And he successfully made that happen. My question is that, should we be worried that if he pushes it too far and when ego comes in place, someone just need to make a wrong move and then start responding.
Throw a match onto
that's right.
the fire.
That's right. And he may end up creating a fire that he himself never intended and he can't control. Yeah. What are your thoughts about that?
I think Trump's first presidency showed us that he is not somebody who likes the physical skirmishes. He doesn't like war. He doesn't like the fact that it wastes a lot of money. Doesn't like the fact that a lot of people die, including American soldiers. So the conventional understanding is that he would not want to get into any kind of skirmishes or wars that will be economically and politically unpopular, right? So I think by default he is not the kind who will go and seek physical aggression. But what he has done and what he will continue to do is to seek aggression in different ways, including in the trade sector, meaning impose tariffs and all these kind of other actions that does not result in any spillage of blood, so to speak, in terms of people fighting. So I think that is his preferred mode of operations. That is how he likes to threaten countries. For example, when Colombia said they are now going to allow flights of those deportees, who are being deported from the US back to Colombia, they're not going to allow those flights to land in Colombia. President Trump basically said, if you want to do that, then I'm going to increase tariffs on your goods being sold to the US by X%, like 40, 50%, right? So then the threat that Trump will use is much more on the economic side of things. And I think, this is where if there's any danger that will come in is because there's a miscalculation, right?
Yep.
If let's say something happens in the South China Sea, a boat bump into another boat, from two different countries, and then, some sort of gun exchange is experienced, somebody dies. If let's say Trump were to somehow act in haste, overplay his card, it could easily sort of like result in unpredictable military engagements in the South China Sea, for example. But I think by and large, he is the type of person who want to avoid these kinds of physical conflicts. So I'm still cautiously optimistic that under Trump 2.0, there won't be any breakout of major wars that are due to some of the things he says and does. Yeah. So, but we'll watch this space and we'll see what happens. Right. So be right back after this. Welcome back to the Are We OK podcast, where we talk about things Trump and not Trump related. Now I want to pivot and talk about our Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. And it's been a busy January for Prime Minister Anwar. He had a long trip overseas where he visited 4 countries. He visited the UAE, where he signed the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement (CEPA), which is an FTA with the United Arab Emirates. And this is actually our first FTA with a member of the Gulf countries, right? So it's, I think, quite important. Then after that, he went to London, to the UK. It's a 4 or 5 day working trip. And I think the areas of significance was the launch of the Brabazon Development Project. I hope I pronounced that right. By YTL in Bristol. Is $1 billion dollar or £1 billion project, which really shows the capability of a Malaysian developer to spread its wings in a significant way in an important city in the in the UK. He also delivered a public lecture at my alma mater, the London School of Economics, where he also officially opened the Malaysian Auditorium. I wish I could have been there. I heard my photo was also shown in the presentation made by the LSE alumni president, Dato' Azman, who was recently named to be the group CEO of the MMC Ports. Congratulations, Dato' Azman. That was, I think, some part and parcel of his external engagement. And he also met with the UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, and he talked about the opportunities to increase trade and investment between the two countries, partly as a result of the UK joining and ratifying the Comprehensive Partnership in Trade in the Pacific, which is the CPTPP, right? So, and then after that, he went to visit Brussels and the EU, and I think the most important outcome of this trip is the acknowledgement and also signing announcement that we are restarting the EU-Malaysia FTA talks, right? This is an important indicator because we suspended or stopped those talks in 2012. So we are restarting it 13 years later. And then finally, Prime Minister Anwar went to WEF, the World Economic Forum in Davos, where he hobnobbed with different political as well as corporate leaders. And I think the highlight of his trip was the fact that he talked about the uniqueness of the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone, right? So, I think a fruitful visit, probably not that much sort of like a focus on individual items, but I think if we put the whole package together, it's about seeking trade and investment opportunities in a situation where I think Prime Minister Anwar isn't exactly known as somebody who was advocating for free trade before, and also open, trading and investment relationships in each of the countries that he went to. Whether it's the UAE, whether it's to the UK, and also to Brussels, where the EU sits. Trade and free trade agreements was an important part of the larger discussion point, and in the case of Davos, not exactly an FTA, but highlighted a new arrangement, a bilateral arrangement between Malaysia and Singapore, right? So, any thoughts on this visit? Did you get, did you pay much attention to this?
No, not
really,
much of
right?
it. But overall, I just felt that his nature of keep going out to try to get all our new trade agreements in, or even old rekindling it, or strengthening it, I think actually it's a very good effort, especially in these kind of times.
Yep.
Right after we talked about Trump as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
good
this
to
becomes,
diversify our risks. Yeah.
Even more important, right? So I would say kudos to that.
And I think it's important to sort of like see the momentum that Prime Minister has built in terms of his overseas engagements. I've been critical about some of these overseas engagements in terms of their strategic value. But I think in this particular trip, of course, not being biased by the fact that he went to LSE to open the Malaysian auditorium, but the other things I think were very, very significant and substantial. I think the fact that you see perhaps Prime Minister Anwar lending support to some of the Malaysian companies that are doing business overseas in a successful way. We see YTL in Bristol. We see a company like Yinsen, for example, in Brazil and also in Peru. There are different opportunities, I think, where he can lend support to companies, Malaysian companies and Malaysian GLCs that are operating abroad. I was made to understand that, as a result of Prime Minister's visit to Brazil, he was also briefed by, President Lula last year when Brazil was the chair of the G20, that Brazil would lower some of its tariffs against some of the glove manufacturers in Malaysia, right? So I think all these things are important, in terms of the external engagement part. And I think what probably the government needs to do more of is to communicate all these positive benefits in a way that is relatable to the man on the street.
Yeah, that's right.
So for example, the fact that the UK joined the CPTPP means that our rubber and palm oil exports going into the UK has actually increased. Because they don't face the same kind of tariffs that they used to, right? So all these, I think, is part and parcel of improving news overseas, and kudos to the Prime Minister for having this kind of active engagement. But now, I think, coming back to Malaysia and our own ASEAN chairmanship and some of the priorities that Prime Minister has announced, I take you to a much more recent happening, which is the second meeting that Prime Minister Anwar has had with the former Prime Minister of Thailand, Thaksin. This was, I think, over the weekend, where he had a private meeting with Thaksin. Apparently they spoke about how to make progress on the conflict in Myanmar. They spoke about cryptocurrencies, which I didn't know that Thaksin was also into. And then they were joined by the former Foreign Minister of Singapore, George Yeo, in dinner later that evening. That was attended by the, you could say the executive chairman of the Institute of Strategic and International Studies Malaysia, ISIS Malaysia, Professor Faiz. So that was part and parcel of, I think, Anwar signaling the fact that he is still, doing foreign policy in a very strategic way on Malaysian soil in ways that hopefully can elevate Malaysia's position within the ASEAN context, right? So. Any comments on some of these recent developments?
I think this meeting in Thaksin is one of the most interesting things. I think until today, ever since we had a conversation with Dr. Elango as well, right? We also highlighted the fact on his relationship with Thaksin. And I think when it comes to this particular dinner, it seems like, while there is one particular person, Professor Faiz, there is also a question about what about other important people, and then is it just a private conversation, or is it gonna be resulting into something? Because it seems like, to me, as far as I am concerned, where are the muscles to do the work?
The follow up.
Because you're too high level up there, right? And you can go and have a talk, but what about your ministry people?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point that you raised, because as chair of ASEAN, we talked about this in our conversation with Dr. Elango. The foreign ministry in Malaysia, Wisma Putra, takes care of the security and political pillar of discussions, right? And if, let's say, it's going to involve Myanmar or other sensitive regional issues, South China Sea, ideally you would want to have the foreign minister, Muhammad Hassan, in the same room.
That's right.
Right, so that whatever was being communicated either to Thaksin or to George Yeo or to both of them, you are there in the room to be able to communicate the priorities of the Prime Minister to your officials in Wisma Putra. Is not the same as, let's say, you ask Prof. Faiz to go and communicate the main thrust of it to you. You are the foreign minister. You should be in the same room, trying to understand the ecosystem, trying to understand what is being communicated, so that you can also convey this message, not just to your own officials, but to the larger ASEAN ecosystem. Right? Because we had, for example, the foreign ministers meeting ASEAN foreign ministers meeting in Langkawi at the end of January, before Chinese New Year, right? So you would want to be able to communicate to other foreign ministers, hey, this is what Prime Minister Anwar wants, and this is how he's going to work together with Thaksin and with George Yeo and others in the ecosystem to deliver these KPIs. But
That's right.
the foreign minister wasn't at the table.
That's right. Yeah. So I was wondering, like, if that's the case, then who's gonna do the work and what kind of work, right? Because okay, fair lah. Maybe you not so close to foreign minister. Then maybe MITI should be there, or maybe defense should be there. Although even then itself is kind of like you're skipping someone, right?
By priority, by protocol, by ASEAN chair kind of priorities, it should be the foreign minister who should have been in that room.
So then it feels a bit, it makes people wonder, what is the real discussion at hand?
And just to take you guys behind the curtain, other foreign embassies, the foreign embassies here in Malaysia, the missions here in Malaysia, from different countries, will take a look at the picture and they will wonder the same thing, right? So to the man on the street, you may look at the picture and you see Thaksin, you see George Yeo, you see Prof. Faiz, who many people may not know, you see Anwar. So your focus will be on Anwar, right? But the diplomats will ask the question that I am raising now, that you've raised as well. Where's the foreign minister, right? And because he's not there, his credibility in the eyes of the diplomatic community here and maybe among the other foreign ministers in ASEAN may be affected, right? Because they'll say you are not in the inner circle, you are not aware, or you are not sort of like really aligned or understand the thinking of the Prime Minister with regards to foreign policy and how this would affect Malaysia's chairing of ASEAN.
That's right. I guess in this sense, the optics that he has projected so far for our Prime Minister, right, is it seems like there are more important affairs outside than ASEAN.
Definitely, Malaysia has to look after our own foreign policy interests. Some of the FTAs that have been signed or will be signed or is being discussed, some of the other foreign policy and security priorities. But as chair of ASEAN, this is an opportunity that you get once every 10 years as a country.
Yes.
Right? This is an opportunity that maybe Anwar will get only once, right? As a Prime Minister, right? Even if he stays on for 2 terms, it may not extend until 2035.
That's
which
right.
is when Malaysia is going to host ASEAN again, right? So, this is an important opportunity, and I just think it would be a waste if, let's say, we don't align strategically and make sure that, like what you say, whatever is being said and discussed, whether it's privately or publicly, you have the arms and legs from the other ministries and agencies to do the follow-up work. Right?
Yeah.
So, that's covering Prime Minister's visits overseas. Maybe just a few last issues, minor issues to sort of like whet the appetite for more discussions to come at a future date. One issue that I'd like to seek your opinion on, Peter, is the fact that the past Perak Commissioner Razman Zakaria mistakenly called Hannah Yeoh a relative of the YTL family, like the daughter of YTL, at a recent event that he, sort of like a gathering of past members and leaders in Perak, right? So I think it's quite obvious that Hannah will probably send him a letter to, take him to court for his defamatory remarks, even though he's apologized to it. So my question to you is this: why do you think leaders in the opposition parties, and specifically PAS, right, whether it's the Kepala Batas MP, this Mastura, or now this Perak PAS Commissioner, Razman, why is it that these leaders continue to make this kind of relatively stupid blunders, I would say? That's one. Second thing is, after they've made these blunders, do you think the leaders that have been defamed, whether it's Guan Eng or Kit Siang or Teresa Kok or Hannah in this case, do you think they should take legal action against these people?
I don't really think it's a blunder. I used to think it's a blunder. But as I grow older and during uni days, I observed this one thing. I observed that there are certain ministers or politicians will say something that you will be like, that's a level 3-year-old mistake, right? And after 5 days later, they will apologize. But what happened is that the mistake accusation will be posted on small papers like Cosmos, like all the weird small publication.
yeah.
Then they'll make an apology on the Star.
So, but the people would have read the more defamatory kind of
Yes. It's
statement.
for targeted audience.
Okay.
And from what I've noticed and what I see is, number one, the reason being is because this is an easy target. Instead of outrightly playing the issue of 3R, you just need to find someone that's closely associated or easily relate to that particular matter. Like, for example, in the case of Hannah, will be because she is well known as a Christian politician. And YTL has also very often stand by as a Christian corporation to a certain extent. And one of the significant representation of the Chinese business. So you just need to relate it together.
Easy targets.
Just need to say something funny. And people who are less exposed will just pick it up. And all you need to do is just apologize in the English papers. Because anyway, it's not to apologize to those who will pick up. On the smaller end, they will continue the same narrative.
Correct. And they will spread these kinds of messages on
That's
WhatsApp
right.
and other social media
That's
platforms.
right. So it is one of the gateway to go into it without outrightly calling for it. Yeah, and so whether it's Guan Ning, whether it's anyone else, very often from what I see is like these are the appointed people to
target lah.
And to attack. Like we always talk about in parliamentary and stuff like that lah.
Yeah. So do you think it is right for Hannah and Guan Ning to sue these people for defamation?
In my opinion, no. I think once you sue them, then it becomes a monkey show. I think some people bait you into a fight because they want the fight to be a spectacle.
They want to blow it out lah.
And it's regardless of what you say. The best way to go about with it is to not get into the fight. Not go into a battle where your opponent picks for you. To go into a battle somewhere else. I think one of the best way to do it is when you're attacking me on such a front, it is best that I understand the reasoning of the attack and deal with that particular issue. For example, if my suspicion is because you're trying to relate me to the Christianing of things, because all these are coinciding together with a book publication and everything all. Maybe it's time to do more activities among Malay kampungs. Because Gambut has plenty of Malay kampung.
Yeah. Which I actually think Hannah does a lot of work there already. Yeah.
And I know she does a lot, but not everything is that well
publicized.
I would add on my firepower in publicizing those efforts.
I take a different view. I think that for remarks that are obviously defamatory, whether it's the Kepala Batas MP saying that Lim Guan Ing and Lim Kit Siang are related to Lim Kuan Yew, which is obviously false. And also, on a more serious note, what Tan Sri Muhyiddin, accused Guan Ing of doing in terms of withdrawing the foundation status of one of the foundations linked to a prominent Malay businessman. If let's say those are defamatory remarks, I have to defend my own reputation. And I think it is also to send a signal to others who may try to want to defame me using these kinds of cheap shots. There is a price to pay. And that price is a monetary price.
Right.
So from that perspective, I think when these signals are being sent out, it's a good reminder that you cannot say whatever you want and get away with it scot-free, right? Without having to literally pay a price in terms of a ringgit value. And then at the same time, it also brings up the fact that when you say things that are obviously false, your own supporters will start to question the leadership abilities of that party. And I've seen, for example, a popular Malay blogger and a YouTuber. He actually came out to criticize this PAS commissioner. So his platform is all about trying to support PAS and whack PH MPs and leaders. But on this particular issue, he himself came out and said, look, I don't agree with what this Razman said. Even though he's a good friend of mine, I think he should step down as PAS commissioner in Perak. Right? So the more these kinds of things are highlighted, I think it shows that these leaders are either incompetent or irresponsible, or maybe even both. Right. So from that perspective, I actually do support Hannah's decision if she does go ahead with it to take this guy to court.
But so when do you think it's too petty to actually sue that person or like sue the person for defamatory in this case? Because I understand if let's say it's extremely defamatory, like if you accuse me of certain wrongdoings I've not done, right?
Yep.
But some of it, if it's at a 3-year-old logic where
No, if let's say, budak ni hodoh lah, right? People say, oh, this minister very ugly, or this minister has a very bad sense of dressing. Dia tak tahu pakai baju apa or whatever. So I mean, those kind of more, I think, even though they could be interpreted as defamatory, but they are not really sort of like attacking you in ways that are related to 3R issues, for example, right? I think those issues, most politicians will let it slide, lah, right? Or this guy is, this guy is overweight, or this person needs to eat more, or whatever, right? So I think those things they are willing to slide, lah.
right.
Slide, yeah.
Right. So only when it comes to a point that they accuse you of doing something they have not.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Okay, maybe just one last issue. This was something that happened during Chinese New Year on the second day, if I'm not mistaken. I started seeing on social media photos and videos of the MP for Bintulu, who's also our tourism minister, Tiong King Sing, going around in Bintulu, trying to help people out in his life jacket. Because there was very serious floods in Sarawak, including in the Bintulu and Sarike areas. This reminded me of the days when I had to do kayaking during the floods in Selangor. It really shows the character of the MP for Bintulu. There's a lot of people who criticize him for different things, which I think some of it is quite valid from a sort of like a demeanor perspective when he's in parliament. But one of the things that I know and the people on the ground also tells me is that this is a guy who really takes care of his constituency, especially the Bumi Putras in his constituency, the Ibans who are living in the long houses and whatnot, right? So when I saw that photo and also the video, it didn't really surprise me, lah. So whether or not that will have any legs, I'm not quite sure. Whether that will change people's image of and also reputation of Tiong King Sing. But on the ground, I can attest to the fact that he's definitely somebody who is very, very popular, and he knows how to take care of his constituents.
Right.
Maybe one last thing. This is impact of DeepSeek's new AI model on some of the Malaysian corporates that have invested, and have pivoted to data centers, whether it's Gamuda, whether it's Sunway, whether it's YTL, I'm sure you've heard the news.
Yep.
This is probably, I would say, the most significant tech news of 2025 so far. Any thoughts? Do you think this DeepSeek thing is a little bit overblown, or do you think the era of dominance of the US AI companies is over, and that they have to share the limelight with some of these Chinese AI companies?
I think that to a certain extent is overblown, but to also another extent is a question about the business model. Why do we say that is this, right? Without NVIDIA developing the earlier group of chips, there wouldn't have been such LLMs, right? The training wouldn't have been so supreme in that sense. What DeepSeek did was that it leveraged on the existing ones.
Yeah, the existing LLMs, ChatGPT.
Existing LLMs. They just reinvented the process.
Make it cheaper and faster.
So instead of kind of think about it this way, right? If you want to think about ChatGPT, it is MAS. It is Singapore Airlines, where the moment you walk in, all the way nice, cantik semua. But what DeepSeek did is kind of like an Asia lah.
Okay.
Yeah, you want flatter bed, no frills, right? Yeah, so it makes it easier. It just reinvented the process. Now, but you still need the guy who created the airplane, right? There's no plane to fly. That's number one.
Okay.
So I think in terms of all the big tech companies, there is still the need to create a plane. However, it changed the game in the sense where in order to make the business relevant, do you really need a full-fledged LLM or a full-fledged, full-service plane, right? I think that is where it's disrupting. Now, so in effect of it towards the Malaysian data center, I think it's actually good news. The reason being is because just a couple of weeks back, we had an announcement that Malaysia will only receive about 50,000 chips or something like that,
yeah.
right? Yeah, which means that our hope to become the high-tech data center is going to be a bit jeopardized, right? But now you are saying that we don't need that.
Yeah, so we don't need so many high-end chips. There are less restrictions on some of the lower-end chips.
That's right.
And I think if, let's say, we can deploy the processing power in ways that can leverage on some of these newer technologies, including, I'm sure, ChatGPT and other, the Facebooks and the Microsoft LLMs also, in a cheaper and faster way, then, our data centers can be used more efficiently.
Yep. So I think actually it's a good news for Malaysia.
Okay. So yeah, maybe some of the negative impact on some of these companies have been a little bit overblown. Interesting area for us to continue to monitor. I'm sure we'll be monitoring it from different perspectives. And yeah, any other issues that you'd like to highlight?
Not much for now. I think it's already quite exciting. I think all of us are really just waiting to hear the next Trump announcement. At the same time, what Malaysia is going to do in terms of ASEAN and so on.
Sure.
Hopefully, our Prime Minister will put up a much more VIP treatment for the whole ASEAN thing.
Yeah. Give it more priority.
Give it more priority.
Strategize a bit more systematically.
Yes.
Get the relevant stakeholders on the same page and doing the necessary follow-up.
Yes.
Moving the arms and legs to mobilize the machine that is Malaysia to really have a good show during ASEAN.
That's right.
Yeah.
And one last thing also is, I think with Trump being the president, there is going to be a really interesting road ahead, because it seems like from the information I've gotten and from what I've heard, in Davos itself during the World Economic Forum, it's quite obvious that all the billionaires are singing praises to Trump, but governments are rather worried. And because these big businesses are also on the front of not just operating in America but other soils, so how they're going to do this balancing act? That will be one interesting part to observe.
Yeah, and I think most companies and even countries will want to play on the safe side, or on the side of caution, and not try to antagonize Trump too much. It'll be interesting to see what other executive orders and announcements he will have, and when it comes and affects ASEAN in ways that are more significant than what we've seen currently. So with that, thank you very much for all your support, and we will see you next